Isle Valen, also known as Isle of Valen, is an island in Placentia Bay. The former main settlement on the island, around a well-protected harbour, is also called Isle Valen. Smaller settlements sprang up from time to time in smaller coves around the island, but the main settlement was around the well-protected harbour in the southwest. It's not certain where the name Isle Valen came from. One story is it was named after a courtier of Louis XIV who was deported to Placentia to remove him from the temptations of Parisian society. Another story is that the name is a corruption of Isle Valen, the name of a department of Brittany. There were likely French settlers there before an English firm established a site around 1800, employing English and Irish. By 1835, the population was up to 167, and it was one of the most important fishing and trading centers in the area. Cod and herring were the main fish. In 1857, the population peaked at 289, of which 168 were Catholic and 103 were Anglican. Catholic roughly corresponds to of Irish descent, and Anglican roughly corresponds to of English descent. Of those 289 people, 8 were born in England and 13 were born in Ireland. An Anglican church was built in 1843, a Catholic church in the 1850s or early 1860s. There were 2 schools, both one room, one Anglican, one Catholic. If you're wondering why such separation of the Anglican and Catholic for such a small community, back then there were tensions between the Anglican and Catholic churches and congregations, which were a proxy of sorts for tensions resulting from the English occupation of Ireland. By 1844, the population of Isle Valen was down to 236, and by 1891, only 141 people were there. Early in the European settlement of Newfoundland, the most important thing was being close to fishing grounds. Before motors, people rowed out to fish, so distance to the fish was important. This resulted in many small settlements forming, close to good fishing grounds. After Newfoundland joined Canada in 1949, roads were built, and the insularity of self-sufficient, isolated island communities, joined only by sea, began to be seen as less desirable. Communities on highways had easier access to the electricity grid, water and sewer systems, larger schools, hospitals, and clinics. This perception of self-contained, isolated communities being less desirable was used by the governments to shepherd people to move from their small communities into larger growth centers. People in communities destined for resettlement were offered money if they moved to a growth center. Resettlement decisions were extremely divisive because the money offered was a lot to people with little, and almost everyone needed to agree to move for anyone to get paid. Resettlement went well enough for the young, many of whom would have left their birthplace to seek their fortune elsewhere anyway. It was much harder on the old, who quickly went from having a purpose, farming, repairing boats, nets, gear, cooking, passing on knowledge, serving as a cultural storehouse, to not being needed anymore. As a traveler with no direct experience, from the people I've talked to, recently after communities are abandoned, feelings are mixed. Some are happy with the money, the change, the new opportunities. Some miss what they had, and some feel they were forced. As the years go by, the money is spent, people have moved on, and what is remembered most is the loss of the community culture and way of life.
I don't think it was designed with that curve in the shank. I think that was bent. It was definitely bent. The top might have been bent, or else it was designed to come out so you'd fold it down for storage. Probably it was just bent. The entrance is over there, around that corner. to go inside the house. You notice what I notice about this? It's all lowland here, and they've dug, I believe they probably dug this. Maybe it was natural, but they certainly lined the edges. The edges are lined with rocks. They must have been carried and put into place. Very pleasant little creek in front of the house. Now, all this green stuff is, as I understand it, this green plant is not native, and it's sort of decorative, and it results in what looks like bamboo. It dies at the end of the summer, and it all falls down, and then it all grows back up again, as I understand it. Old stove, an old wood stove. See, this is Acme. Some more pieces of a wood heater, wood stove. This was a store. Oh, we got a spider web. The spiders live here. This room here was a store. This house had a lot of purposes, because it was a store. It was a family house, and then they rented out a room to the school teachers. So this looks like the main room. It's the kitchen. The parlor, I think you would call it. So they had electricity. That's the wood stove. There's a crib for a baby. Floorboards. Actually, everything looks pretty good. I looked outside, and the foundation looks okay. So this, and a dresser, and a big wood stove. I don't know why there's two wood stoves, but there are. I don't know that they ever had any insulation other than 2 layers of wood. That's how it looks. I think that's typical. I think the typical construction was an interior layer of wood and an outside layer of wood. And, insulation that we have today wasn't really available. Seems solid. So this was the teacher's room, rented out to the teachers who taught in the school. Got a bit of music there. So the wallpaper was put over top of the newspaper. Here.
Maybe the newspaper was insulation.
I am at the Catholic graveyard on Isle Valen. So I think the fence is to keep animals away. Headstone, sorry. 1936. 1961. I suppose I should cut the tree. I mean the branches, I suppose. Oops. I don't honestly know what the etiquette is in an old cemetery. You're supposed to prevent it from growing over? I assume so. John Williams, Vincent Call. Yeah, at first I thought that was the end of it, but you see, there's also, I don't know, did this fall down, or maybe it was supposed to be down? I don't know. (1964) Simon Benin. I think this was supposed to be down. I think that is the casket. I just walked down this trail to the entrance. You can see all the old, see a bunch of broken lobster pots.
The people from these isolated, self-sufficient communities had to be very independent people. Day in and day out, with no weather forecasts, no GPS, no radios or cell phones, they rowed out to sea to fish from small boats. Now, fog is frequent in Newfoundland, and it often comes with wind. Think about fog and a rising gale off a rocky coast. You don't want to be there. Think of the dangers these people face daily in making a living. They had no support other than themselves and each other. Can you imagine what these self-sufficient people, used to dealing with real risk daily, would say to someone telling them they need a vaccine passport to get on a ferry or eat at a restaurant to keep them safe? It's just after dawn. The light is low and the tide is high, so you don't see the rock that's close off the port side, which makes me steer near the cliff on the starboard side as we turn the corner and leave the protection of the inner harbor and the beautiful shores of Isle Valen to continue our journey.